Hey guys, so since I enjoyed talking so much about one of my favorite subgenres of movie, any type of movie, space apocalypse movies, I thought we would do another video, another list of another one of my favorite subgenres of all time, teen screams. I think teen horror is arguably one of the most underrated aspects of horror, or subgenres of horror, because typically the movies that are like described as teen horror are rated really low critically, which I don't really understand because there's definitely an audience for them. So my list is definitely more of like my personal favorite teen horror movies, and this list doesn't include any classics. I'm sorry. Well, to me they're classics, but they're more like modern movies. So they're not like Halloween or Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, all involving teens. None of those are on this list. I like classic horror, you know, but just for me, my personal favorites are more modern, so just want to give that disclaimer. And given that it's my own personal list, some of these are going to be very controversial. Are they technically the best movies? No. But all that being said, if I missed your favorite teen scream or your favorite teen horror movie, please leave it down in the comments. So before we get into my list, I just want to thank Shudder for sponsoring today's video. Shudder is of course a premium streaming service for all things horror, thriller, and suspense. Their curated collection includes blockbuster hits, horror classics, and original and exclusive content. And this month, Shudder is actually celebrating halfway to Halloween, which, so excited, cannot wait to decorate for Halloween already. I'm so glad we're halfway there. But April being halfway to Halloween is Shudder's biggest month of programming, so if you've been debating getting Shudder, now would be a really good time to get it. One of the biggest shows streaming this April on Shudder is actually Creepshow, and you guys know I loved season 1 so much. I talk about it every single time I talk about Shudder, and season 1 was actually the most watched series on Shudder in history. And now season 2 is back with 9 episodes. It just recently premiered, and every Thursday they will release a new episode. Another favorite movie that I've recently watched on Shudder was The Dark and the Wicked, which if you have not seen that yet, it is so good. It's such an atmospheric, symbolic horror, and I'll definitely talk more about it in my monthly recap, but let me just tell you, go watch it right now. You can stream Shudder completely ad-free on all of your devices, including iOS and Android, Xbox One, Amazon Fire TV, Google Chromecast, and Roku, all for $5.99 a month or $56.99 per year. Or of course you can try Shudder for free for 30 days if you go to shudder.com and use my code POSSESSED30. So we're gonna start my list with a little bit more of my cheesier picks, and then we'll work our way into like some better one. Well, I don't know. This isn't like a ranking video of like which are cheesy and not, but you can't do teen horror most of the time without doing a little bit of cheese, and to me that only adds to the genre. If you've been a subscriber for a long time, you know what's coming. You wanna say it with me? The Haunting of Molly Hartley. This is a 2008 movie and is a religious horror that stars Haley Bennett, who's really made a name for herself, I think, in the thriller horror genre with movies like Swallow, and she was also in The Devil All the Time, and I think she's only gotten better as an actor. So if you liked her in those movies, do be warned, Haunting of Molly Hartley is not known to be great. And this is probably the movie I've recommended the most on my channel. I don't even know if I say I recommend it. It's just one that I really enjoy and talk about. But obviously that leads to a lot of people watching it. And I don't know if I want to be known for that movie. Like, I don't know if it's a good thing that that's the movie that I'm kind of known for loving on this channel. I'd probably rather be known for recommending some like really good obscure horror movies that no one's heard of. But alas, I recommend really bad teen horror movies. But that's okay, that's me, that's who I am. And I'm not sorry about it. It's early 2000s cheesy teen horror. There is nothing better in the world to me than that, so I'm not sorry about it. If you're not into that, oh well. Now this does hold a 3% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, so like I said, critically underrated, in my opinion. My favorite critic review of this movie is by Keith Phipps for the AV Club. And he gave the film a D+ and said that it's a horror film better suited for skittish cats than humans. I love that. I mean, it is very much intro to horror, nothing really scary going on. It, to me, is just a comfort movie. It's just like the ease of it, the cheesy nature of it, great, you know, beginner horror movie if you're, you know, getting into it. It's not the best, you know, movie in the world. It's not the most well done, but I will recommend it until the day I die or until the day I stop posting on this channel. And if you're wondering if the sequel is worth your time, please do not watch it. Thank you. Next up, we have another cheesy teen horror in Sorority Row, which actually isn't a teen horror at all. So is it cheating? They're technically graduating college. So what is that, 22, 23? The atmosphere of this movie, of Sorority Row, just screams teen slasher to me though. And they're young enough, I feel, to kind of fit the genre. I don't know, I'm kind of old, so maybe that's why it seems to fit the genre for me. So despite its ratings, again, critically not recepted well. Despite that and the cheesy plot and the very average acting, this has some of my favorite slasher deaths in all slasher movies. The death scenes are just so creative and so over the top that it is just such a good slasher. This is obviously a remake, and I think it doesn't really relate to the original at all. I haven't seen the original, but this one, the 2009 one, is just amazing. If you're looking for cheesy slasher, like, that's modern, because obviously the 80s are kind of known for cheesy slasher, but if you want a more modern one, Sorority Row is so good. And I will die on that hill. Next up, another cheesy one. Are we surprised? Like I said, cheese and teen horror, they just go together in the best way possible. House of Wax from 2005. I should also mention that I've talked about all of these movies at one point or another on this channel because teen horror is one of my favorite subgenres. So sorry, it's a little bit repetitive. That's why this video is a little bit shorter. So House of Wax, of course, is also a remake, not a direct remake by any means. Early 2000s. Again, they're college aged, I believe, but IMDb says they're teens, so they could be like 19, you know? That still counts. Also, you can't tell me that this movie doesn't have like the lightheartedness of like a cheesy teen Scream. Of course, House of Wax has an iconic cast. Paris Hilton was actually the first person cast for this movie, which just like baffles me. Like, why? Why did they go that route? I'm not mad at it, but I'm just like, why was that the first person you cast for this movie and said she's perfect? And then everyone else was cast around her. So just an interesting choice. Again, not mad at it. I enjoy it. I enjoy her in this movie. Next, we have Final Destination 1 and 3. Not all Final Destination movies, of course, are teen screams or anything like that, but today, specifically, I'm talking about the first and the third one, which both revolve around high school students. Did you know originally the plot of Final Destination was going to be used as a plot line in the X-Files? Final Destination, I don't even need to delve into it. It's one of my favorite film franchises of all time. Obviously, these are very teen based, although I'd say less so. It has less cheese than the other movies so far that I've mentioned. Some might argue with me on that one. We don't talk about the Final Destination, but generally this is like one of my favorite film franchises. And 1 and 3 are actually some of my favorite in the whole series. 1, 2, and 3 are obviously my favorites. I think a lot of people say that. The 5th one was really good as well. There's only 5, but like I said, we don't talk about the 4th one. It doesn't exist in the universe, okay. But I think 1 and 3 I'm more drawn to because they're teen horror, and that's just, you know, one of my favorites. So I think that's one of my favorite aspects about Final Destination 1 and 3. Next up is It Follows, which came out in 2014. Famous movie. I think this really shook the horror genre when it came out because it was so unique for its time. And this one is obviously a more serious tone teen horror, and the teen aspect of it is just like a side thing. It's not even like a more prevalent theme in the movie, I guess you would say. And this has one of the highest, and this holds some of the highest ratings for any movie on this list, both critically and from fans. And I think that's for good reason, because it was such a well done movie, especially for having a more lower budget compared to most horror movies. And I think that just added to the effectiveness of the movie, that they didn't have to spend a lot on this movie. And to this day, it still has some of the most chilling, terrifying scenes that I've seen in modern movies. Next, we have, of course, Jennifer's Body from 2009. I don't know if I really ever delved into this movie or talked much about it, other than I included it in my top 50 early 2000s horror movies. I will link that video up here if you want to know more. And Jennifer's Body was definitely a movie that was way ahead of its time with the themes in it, and people just loved to make fun of this movie so much when it came out and make fun of Megan Fox. She was, you know, way ahead of her time, in my opinion. And the marketing of this movie really killed it. I think that they marketed it towards men, which wasn't actually the director's choice, I believe. But I think the director created such a good movie here, but it just came out like 10 years too early. But it has gained popularity over the last 5 years or so, and a lot of, you know, love and appreciation for this movie, which I'm really happy to see. I don't want to sound too hipster right now, but I have loved this movie ever since watching it, and I've owned it pretty much since it came out. And I remember having it in my collection, and people would come over and like mock it or make fun of it, like, why did I own that back in like 2010? I just think it is a great, gory, possession teen horror movie that everyone should watch, at least now. If you were turned off by it for some reason and when it came out, like, you need to just get on the Jennifer's Body bandwagon right now. Of course, this list of teen screams would not be complete, and I know I would get so many comments if I did not include this movie in it. Scream. I'll be upfront that the Scream movies aren't my favorite franchise or anything. I've probably rewatched them the least on this list, but of course, if you're looking for teen horror, like, Scream is iconic. And I think that these self-aware horror movies really capture the essence of slasher movies and really modernized the genre, and I would say also transformed it a little bit. I think it really paved the way for future modern movies, so we have to appreciate Scream at least for that, but they are very enjoyable movies. Next up, Ginger Snaps from 2000. Again, this is probably the most underrated on this list, although not literally and not critically or fan-wise. I just think it's the most underrated, meaning that this is the one that the least amount of people have probably seen on this list. Apparently, it didn't actually gain much notoriety in the US. It was really successful in Canada and Australia for some reason, but was also banned in the UK for promoting violence against teenagers. I also think it had something to do with the fact, especially in the US, why it wasn't really promoted much or sold much, because Columbine kind of happened around that time. But once it hit VHS, especially in the UK, it became one of the fastest selling horror movies in its time. And the sequels are a little bit weird. I don't know if I'd fully recommend them. I think they're out of the teen stuff by that point anyway, so it's not really relevant to this video. The second one's okay. The third one gets real weird. I don't know what happened there. Okay, this next one, you might want to guess. It from 2017, the remake. Now, obviously, this whole list is my personal favorite teen horror movies, but it has to be probably in my top 3 teen horror movies of all time. Now, of course, this is the remake of the classic movie and the story by Stephen King. I'd say one of the most effective and best remakes in history. I know that's saying a lot, but I think it is an amazing remake and one of my favorite Stephen King adaptations ever, which they did change a lot from the books and stuff, obviously, but I think in a really good way. They modernized it so well, and personally, I think the sequel was just as good as the first one, which is apparently controversial. Not a lot of people loved the sequel, although that's not relevant to this video because it follows them as adults, as we know, but this is the highest grossing Stephen King adaptation to date, and it actually propelled way more interest in others doing Stephen King adaptation projects after many, many years of failed projects. And it seems like now everyone wants to make a Stephen King movie adaptation or something, and I'm here for it. I've always loved Stephen King, so I'm excited. Still waiting on The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, though, movie. That would be great. Okay, the last movie in this list, although not the last one we're going to talk about, I have one honorable mention to talk about at the end. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. This is the most modern movie on this list, the most recent one. This came out in 2019, easily and instantly became one of my favorite teen horror movies / instantly became a comfort movie for me. Obviously, Stephen Gamble is one of my favorite artists of all time, who he drew all of the Scary Stories original artwork in the books, and you know, and seeing his art come to life was incredible. And the story was by Guillermo del Toro, which again, one of my favorite creators, horror creators ever. So I wasn't surprised with how much I loved this one. It's also a Halloween movie. I've done a whole review on it. I will link up here if you're curious. It is rated PG-13, so I would say this is actually a really good beginner horror movie as well, even though some of the monsters and scenes are genuinely terrifying. This is such a great example of how you can do a really good horror movie and still have it be PG-13. I did a whole list of my favorite PG-13 horror movies already. Again, I'll link it, I guess. And just proves that you can do like a very unsettling horror without all the gratuitous stuff and keep it PG-13 and make it more accessible for more people. Okay, are you ready for the honorable mention? It deserves to go way at the beginning of this video with the more cheesier picks. Cabin Fever, Spring Fever. I know. If you're looking to get really, really super grossed out, like don't eat or anything, but also it's set at a high school prom, this one's for you. Again, not the best well-made movie on this list or anything. I just wanted to give it a mention if you are looking for a really like gross, gory teen horror. Not a lot of people, I think, talk about Spring Fever, probably for a reason, because it's not like fantastic, but I liked it. Can you say that? Because it's very gross. It's nothing like the original, although they are connected. So if you are a fan of the original and haven't seen Spring Fever, don't really expect the same kind of quality as the first one. But I wanted to give it an honorable mention in case you haven't seen it yet, because maybe some of you will enjoy it. Well, there you have my top 10 teen screams. I know I've talked about these movies, you know, a lot in the past, but I mean, I wanted to create a curated list of my favorite teen horror movies. I know I'm missing some, which is like killing me. It's so frustrating because I know I'm not coming up with all the other ones that maybe I should have made this a 15, 20 movie list. But if you want a part 2 down the line, I can do that as well. Make sure you comment your favorite teen scream down below in the comments. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.